Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to give it just a couple of minutes and let a couple other folks jump on, and then we will get started.
It's so funny how when you're waiting for things to start, a minute feels like a really long time.
Yeah, it does. It's like 1 minute. Well, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again for joining today. This is our second community hour of the year. My name is Jenny Norris, and I'm the Members and Programs Coordinator for Converged User Group. If you're new or not familiar with Converged User Group, we're a community focused on connecting users and prospects of Dell's CI and HCI technologies and solutions. We do this in a variety of different ways, including virtual, VR, and in-person events, mainly to bring our members together to share best practices and ideas. We have a lot of great events coming up this year that I'll touch on before we wrap up today. And then a few things for today. I'd like to remind everyone that we do use the Q&A function to ask our speakers questions, so make sure you use that. If you want to contribute to any of the discussion, please feel free to put that in the chat box and we will keep an eye on the conversation there. Lastly, we will be including a link to a survey at the end of the event today. So this feedback is really appreciated for us as a user group to plan for future events. So with that being said, David, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jenny, and welcome everybody. We've got another fantastic community hour for you today. I am joined with Jim Hall, Senior Consultant of IT Architecture, Dell Technologies, Matt Paul, Senior Director, PowerFlex Product Management at Dell Technologies, and my very special co-host, Adam Little, Converged User Group Board of Directors and Cybersecurity Administrator, New Belgium Brewing. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining, and folks, thanks for joining us. Now, before we get started, I do want to thank our sponsors, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel, for helping make this possible. I want to reiterate what Jenny said. We'd love to hear from you in the chat, so please, ask questions, push them forward. We'd love this to be an interactive opportunity. And for those of you heading out to DTW, please mark your calendars. We're going to do our annual in-person Converged User Group meeting there as well this year. It'll be great to see faces, shake hands, share beverages, cocktails, a little bit of food. But, let's just get that sense of community going strong. All righty. Today's topic, PowerFlex, and we have a great team to discuss it. Adam, I really appreciate you jumping in and co-hosting with me. Why don't you kick it off and bring the customer perspective into the conversation here? Where should we start?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me, David. So yeah, Matt, I guess one of the things I was going to ask about is we're a big VxRail customer at New Belgium. I think that kind of, in our evolution, right, it kind of made sense in our production sites to have a little more focused approach at those sites. But can you talk to the benefits and maybe compare VxRail to PowerFlex and why a customer might choose PowerFlex over VxRail, and just tell us what's new in that space and what our customers might want to know.
You're on mute, Pat.
Yeah, we got double mute there.
Double mute.
How about that? Is that any better?
There you go.
Yes.
You're trying to be super safe, and that's what you get. Adam, yes, thanks for the question, folks. So as mentioned, I run the product management team here at Dell for PowerFlex. Couple things. I think based on kind of this form, I would describe PowerFlex at a macro level. If you think about VxBlock, in terms of it being an engineered system and all the value props that you guys kind of love and align with it, you know, take that point of view and then say, but it includes software-defined storage instead of traditional storage, right? In terms of the core components, you know, we're still anchored on being engineered. We're still anchored on being manufactured. So there's the site surveys and those kind of things that everybody loves and works through. End-to-end managed. I think if there was a unique point of view with the product that's maybe, you know, a little bit stronger, I'll just say, than kind of, you know, where we are with the block, it would be around the management paradigm, right? We have a product called PowerFlex Manager that's included with the software that allows you to do kind of all of that end-to-end life cycle that you would normally see as the value prop associated with HCI. So the automating of firmware updates, the automating of software updates, all of that stuff gets integrated and aligned. And then, you know, the key thing to take away is we kind of use that RCM as the baseline. And so not only are you using the RCM that you guys are used to in terms of, hey, what should the stack look like? But then we have our PowerFlex Manager actually help you implement that a little bit more in an automated fashion, right? So at a macro level, I would say that's kind of, you know, a huge kind of the big product point of view. The interesting thing about PowerFlex is we have multiple consumption models. So if, you know, it is software-defined storage at its core. So if you wanted to use something like a Ready Node and design your environment around, you know, anchoring more customization in your own management paradigm or doing things in that space, you can, you know, align with a Ready Node and then buy the software on its own. And the same with the appliance. So talked a little bit about the rail. We actually, in fact, recently just did kind of a joint development work with the rail team that's just recently launched around the VxRail dynamic nodes, which is basically a VxRail node without storage disks inside of it. And the key tenet on that is being able to use that great lifecycle management, front-end compute automation with different types of backends. And then in this scenario, you might want to have a traditional 3-tier or PowerFlex to deliver that backend value. And if you were to say, hey, well, why would you think of a PowerFlex versus a rail? It comes down to a few key tenets around PowerFlex extreme scale, extreme performance, and flexibility, right? And we can you know, talk a little bit more about what those mean, but you can start with as little as 3 nodes and go up to thousands of nodes, right? In terms of our scale. In terms of performance, you achieve more and more IOPS just by adding more nodes. And so the more nodes you add, the faster it gets with still sub-millisecond response times. I think Jim may have some feedback on that based on what we're doing internally, but that's how we add value. And so when you get to a point on your cluster size with the rail deployment, if it's a really high pushing Oracle product that you normally maybe put on a PowerMax in your other areas, well, you can think about, well, I'm modernizing my data center. I want to look software defined. Maybe I should look at PowerFlex as a vehicle to deliver those kind of new, interesting workloads. The other, I think, value prop here, there's lots, but one key thing is the fact that it allows you to run these things, whether it's existing architectures, you know, today's architectures or futures architectures. We're not tied to a specific hypervisor. And so when you think about VxRail or other products, you have to have that in the virtualization environment. But with PowerFlex, you can run bare metal, you can run with hypervisors, you can run ESXi, you can run vSphere, I mean, you could run Microsoft's, you can run bare metal containers if you want, and still get all that benefits of software-defined infrastructure. So, you know, I could talk a million years about what it is, but maybe there's some questions. But at a core, that's really what it is and how we're differentiating and helping our customers. In terms of a few new things, in case there's some folks that, or things that we just released, in case there's folks that kind of want to know, hey, what's new and exciting? A few things that we just launched is kind of end-to-end alignment with our 15G product launch. And the cool thing about that is in lots of scenarios, you know, the power of software-defined really is shining through, right? The reason you go software-defined is because you add new technology, new speed, new processors, and the software just keeps scaling. And so in this scenario, if you compare 14G hardware and you plug in 15G hardware and do the kind of greenfield work, like you never have to do it. You're getting, you know, in some cases 50, 75% performance bumps without ever having to change your software, right? So those kind of things in terms of new and innovative, we'd add AMD in that last run on the compute side. You know, and then just ecosystem areas is another big place that we've been spending a lot of time on. So it's really around, you know, integrating more with Cloud IQ, working with other products in the ecosystem that allow us to bring value like AppSync and things of that nature. So those are some of the new kind of things coming your way in terms of the PowerFlex product. Hopefully that's enough to at least give you a good idea.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great start. I'm sure Jim has some comments on that. I also think that's super interesting of like a, you know, a path from what you have to kind of consolidating on this managed platform, right? Of if you had ready nodes and you wanted some way to kind of rein that in and get better control. But yeah, that's super interesting. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I have lots. Yeah, I think, you know, yeah, I'm internal to Dell, right? So we have the whole menu of options, you know, from the Dell menu that we can pick and choose from to put into our environment. And I would say about 6 years ago, I mean, and we've had deployments, you know, when you think about kind of a legacy IT shop, right? We had one of everything, and trying to scale these things and trying to build a cloud, right, that is self-service, that we can introduce automation to, from a blueprint perspective, to be able to deploy databases, right? We had to rethink, okay, what do we build this on, right? And we wanted something that worked really well with VMware, right? We're 100% VMware shop, right? For our compute. And we needed something that could scale performance-wise. And I think it's also, like, it's not VxRail or PowerFlex, right? For us, it's VxRail and PowerFlex. And we use VxRail extensively in a lot of our deployments. But what PowerFlex solved for us was just what Matt touched on, right? That scalability, that performance. Taking these applications that used to require a dedicated compute and network, and, you know, from a fiber channel and a PowerMax or VMax, right? Taking those things that and saying, hey, we want to provide a cloud-like experience for these databases and these applications and these workloads, and just being able to run them on PowerFlex and have that performance, have that you know, peace of mind that we're not going to run into any issues. That's really what enamored us with it. And we go back, you know, and he talked about all the different deployment models, right? We started at the pure software defined, like get the code, we built our own server, right? Put Scale IO on it, and then, wow, we love the performance. But over time, right, as the thing grows, you want that engineered solution. So we transitioned to ready nodes, right? So if you look at the history of PowerFlex at Dell, it's like the history of the product, right? Just in every incarnation. We moved to ready nodes because we wanted some of that flexibility of how do we define our networking, right? There were some things in our networking that were ahead of what the product could, you know, maybe out of the box do, right? And then, you know, we shifted to appliance a couple years ago, and that's where we're at today, right? We're 100% appliance. We run in all the modes, right? We have hyper-converged, we have 2-layer, we do mixed. It was very easy for us to bring GPUs into our environment. We, you know, for our data science as a service and the common block storage. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to mix the flow, but I think it's important for the team to the group to understand the difference between hyper-converged, storage only, and compute only.
Sure.
And because that's a fair point.
Yeah.
You walk through, because we know it. It's like the back of our hands. Maybe either I could explain it, or you can, you know, from a customer's perspective, maybe you can talk a little bit about what and why, you know, what that means to you and to us in terms of having that flexibility and why it matters. That makes sense.
Yeah. I can kind of tee it up, and yeah, if there's things. So for us, right, we started on a 2-layer model. And really it was about adding that performance, that capability into our environment. When we looked at licensing costs and other things, right, there's a lot of cases where 2-layer makes a lot of sense when you want to kind of segment your compute from your storage. And also from an operating model perspective, right, if you kind of look at the evolution of it in our organization, right, there's also kind of evolution of the staff too and what they support. When you look at traditional storage organization with storage support and networking and things like that kind of being separate from compute, right? It was very compatible with that. As the team evolved, as we learned more, in addition to like VxRail, right, hyper-converged, right, we cross-blended skill sets within the team, and so we just have a software-defined compute team, right?
Yeah.
And so then when we transitioned to HCI, right, that was about there's a number of things, right? A lot of it was maximizing our network port, our rack utilization, things like that, but augmenting it with a 2-layer. So yeah, I guess Matt, if you want to kind of
I could supplement, but that I think that does a good job explaining a lot of the things that you've seen in terms of why you're doing it. Guys, I think if you take a step back and you think about the way traditional 3-tier works, you have your workloads running on your compute and it talks through fiber to your storage on the back end. That's what we mean by 2-layer. In the software-defined world, we truly have these completely separated. And so on the front end, you would run a component called an SDC, and then that would talk to the true backend storage. And so you can scale them 100% independently. So if you just need more storage, you would just add something with potentially very little compute muscle in it, some network cards, and the storage you want, and it would scale completely independent. So depending on your workload, you can do whatever you want one way or the other, right? And then the and that can run in all the ways that we talked about. That can run bare metal on the back end. That can run HCI if you want to. I mean, that can run hypervisors. That can run containers. It doesn't matter. And then the other angle is like what Jim was talking about, just like you do with Rail. You pack those together, the compute, the storage, the management, all on that single stack. And there's lots of benefits associated with that as well. The power with the product is you could start one way and grow another. You can start one way and then decide, oh, shoot, I actually need to convert to the other. And because it's software defined, you could move things off the other way. Or you can have things like, hey, I have complete HCI and all of a sudden have a heavy workload that's going to be running a lot of HANA. And I don't want to spend the dollars on a bunch of disks in those. So let me just buy a bunch of 4 processor boxes and set up a small area and it can still talk to that storage. And so those are the kind of flexibility benefits that we were talking about. Adam, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I just keep going back to like, as a customer, right, being like, okay, you may already have some disparate pieces involved here, right? And it's like, how do I wrangle that all in, right? Is it some massive migration to a brand new cluster, right, of like trying to modernize those workloads or make them, shoehorn them to fit a certain solution, right? Where this is an interesting approach that you can kind of piecemeal what you need, right? If you need to scale up different portions of it, you can adjust to what you need. So I think for a lot of customers, that'd be relevant on their journey, right? It's not all or nothing. You can kind of incorporate some of those pieces.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really bringing in the power of software-defined infrastructure, and piecemeal is a good view as long as you think about automation too, the software automation that we're bringing.
Right, yeah.
You want to make sure those two go together because my goal is to make it easy for you guys, right?
As
easy as possible. This stuff's complicated.
Totally, yeah, right. I was going to say from my experience, right, I think as we move to VxRail, because of that automation, right, it kind of enabled us to stay more up to date with it, to try to, there's always that looking for windows and did somebody check the compatibility on these pieces, right? So having some sort of a lifecycle manager automation to do that is super relevant, right? And I think that probably that's something, David, we see over and over again with our members of top of mind is automation and security. And how does that tie in? How do I get to where we need to be? Is there a solution that can help me get there? So I think that's great that you guys are highlighting, all the automation and security pieces of that. What all can you guys elaborate a little more on some of the automation stuff that you can do with it to kind of give them an idea of overall how that solution can really help them move that bar?
Yeah, Jim, what do you do?
Yeah, go ahead.
How's the automation going? And
sure.
How did that journey go?
It's ongoing, but what would really PowerFlex enable for us, right at the core, was that consistent experience, right, for a block store, and we build on top of our VMware stack, right, our DDC portal, which is our cloud portal, and so database as a service, VM as a service, our containers, and our platform as a service all live on top of VMware, and we use VRA, Terraform, Open Service Broker, and we have a whole a whole architecture around all of that, but it plugs into, our ecosystem, right? Our infrastructure, so PowerFlex being one of that. So to be able to deliver those databases, those services, right? It just works. When we talk about like automation from a build perspective, right? It's a PowerEdge server at the core, and we've built a lot of internal automations around PowerEdge servers, and so we leverage all of that historical capability from DRAC and Open Manage and DHCP with the zero touch provisioning, and we are able to bring these nodes in, rack them, and for us it's a little bit different. Maybe and I was supposed to silence that. My watch goes off. Silence my phone. But we built the automations for vSAN and VxRail and PowerEdge, and we're able to take those automations and apply them directly to PowerFlex. And more recent, and so that's kind of like the day one type stuff, right? The build. We look at day two for the maintenance activities, right? We plug in. We've got a lot of custom scripts that we do, but as we move towards PowerFlex Manager, which is been out for a little over a year now, maybe a year and a half, our new deployments are really looking at how do we leverage and bring that PowerFlex Manager into place. And we've got our federal environment, right? It's 100% built with PowerFlex Manager. And as we build out our new capabilities and our new regions, right? We're starting with PowerFlex Manager as the basis for that, and then we'll work to convert. So we've gone through a conversion too, right? We've gone from Scale IO ready nodes to the VxFlex ready nodes to PowerFlex appliance, and we're on a conversion of going from converting our ready node to appliance, right? And then being able to bring those in. There's a couple other things that like, so when we look at from an automation perspective, being able to automate the ESX patching, the PowerFlex storage patching, and all of the firmware and stuff like that, that's really key. And when we look at, I've got 3,500 nodes, we'll have probably 5,000 nodes or more at the end of the year, right? That is definitely something that, how do we manage this footprint? How do we keep it up to date, right? And that's something that we're constantly working on. But yeah,
I think well described. If you think about PowerFlex Manager, it's hitting on all the key areas, right? Deployment, health alerting, monitoring your environment, helping you maintain your environment, keep it up to date. Interesting thing around the maintain is, the automation to deliver and to kind of set up your environment is done through templates. And the template actually aligns all the way up through not only kind of OS or OS deployments and alignment, but it goes all the way up through cluster creation. And so we have a very tight integration with vCenter. And so think about all the things that you need to set up a cluster within vCenter, whether it's the dynamic switching, all the pieces associated with that we in PowerFlex Manager kind of take care of that end to end by leveraging our integration to vCenter, right? We're not creating this stuff on its own. Or if you think about, hey, I got a bad disk and I need some help figuring out. So we have a process in which you click a couple buttons, the box goes into maintenance mode, and it does kind of the macro maintenance mode associated with the SDS, and then it aligns the maintenance mode that's associated with VMware's maintenance mode. So DRS helps us move all the things off as appropriate. We do the maintenance, we switch what we need to do, we do the firmware updates, and then we kind of reverse that. And so I think, the tight integration with VMware is a big value prop here on areas that we differentiate. And the idea is looking at each of those pain points that you guys feel, and what can we do to make that easier? It's always a work in progress. Nothing is ever perfect with automation. And for you guys have been around for a while, that. But I feel pretty proud of where we are. We're getting, some pretty large customers continue to adopt and bring it forward. And I could talk, the value prop of the product. If we were talking 4 years ago, it would be all about SDS, right? The value prop of this product is more tied to kind of the engineered system piece that you guys understand and know and love. You can't have that IP on the software side about, oh, this is really fast, it works really well, if you need to have a million knobs to twist and things to do and others to deal with. And so these two things together was what really helped solve your problems. Because at the end of the day, some of those initial value props that we were talking about 10, 12, 14 years ago with Block are still very relevant today, right? And those are the things that we want to try to help with. So that's my 2 cents on PowerFlex Manager. We are investing a ton in it as well from an engineering perspective.
With the automation, sorry, Jim, just I want to dig into this a little bit. A lot of the automation that you guys have done, Jim, is that available to other PowerFlex customers, or is that unique to Dell? How is the automation education or best practices being shared?
They're actually looking to productize the DDC portal, but that's an effort that we're looking into. But that's definitely a custom built, internal cloud experience, right? So we were challenged with providing a frictionless experience for our app developer community and the customers of our infrastructure to get what they need within as few clicks as possible, right? And so, basically looking like an Azure and AWS, right, but internally facing. And a lot of that was we had to simplify our infrastructure components going into this, and make decisions on, especially in the software-defined storage space, right? What scales, what fits that, and that helped enable that paradigm. When we look at automation from PowerFlex Manager, I mean, that's something that's available to customers today, right? There's nothing that we do unique. We do, like I said, we have 20 plus years of server experience that we've built into, into our environment, that we leverage a lot of that capability. And because, like I said, at its core, and we went to Matt's org and said, hey, we want these specific features, right, in the product, because we want to leverage our automation, right, for those things, right, that we've built over time. But as we transition, right, we're looking more towards, okay, how can we leverage more PowerFlex, especially in the build space, and then in the patching, those things. And I think what that does is it forces us to deploy our solutions in a way that really align with the vision of the product, right? And I think that's really important too, because it's been like I said, when it was Wild West 6-7 years ago, right? You could buy any server you wanted, put PowerFlex on it, you can mix, match, you can do all sorts of things. But when you want to run an enterprise, you want to have that stability and peace of mind, right? It's fine to deliver 10 million IOPS, but if it's stuff is this NIC card is doing whatever, right? And you have to manage the firmware updates and all these things, right? That's where having that engineered solution, the appliance, or even the radio, right? That's important. And I think that's really what helped step up the game in our environment, right? And really provide, it's not just us as the practitioners that have to be convinced that this is something, right? It's our leadership too, right? That's okay, we're putting our eggs in this basket. It needs to be the most secure, best basket that you can put them in, right?
I think, well said. I think from a product perspective, if I take it up a layer, right? The vision around the experience with Flex Manager, Jim, you did a fantastic job. I think that's exactly where we want to be. But it's all built on, a common set of APIs that we have, complete Ansible playbooks ready and available for you guys to use. And so think about it as a mechanism in which, you can do your additional automation on top by calling into Flex Manager to do the work, right? Or calling into iDRAC to do the things. And so the goal is to create that common set of APIs that then you could either use it graphically, or in most cases, to Jim's point, as the scale gets to a certain size, that no longer makes sense, right? It doesn't make sense to do it in that percent, that way, and then you start to be able to use those APIs that we do in your automation. One other thing I would say in terms of kind of the vision that might help you picture this. So when you're deploying, let's say you want to deploy a cluster, you define that cluster in the product, and then basically you hit deploy. And we go out, discover, align, build, and create that cluster automatically for you. It's all set, ready to go. Once that's done, that I kind of refer to that cluster as a living service. And so when you go back to try to service that, or you need to do things with it, you go to that service, and then there's a list of tons of things you can do. You want to add VLANs, you want to add servers, you want to add blah, blah, blah. You want to upgrade, you want to change the baseline to a new RCM, all these things you can do from managing at that service level. And that's kind of what PowerFlex does as well, is it kind of changes the paradigm, moves it away from managing things on an individual basis and managing things more from an outcome basis.
Adam, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, to an extreme degree for sure. Again, I think it is
A good one.
you know, right, there's different scales of customers, right? Obviously, internally at Dell, right, you guys, I'm sure, are like, you know, you have the keys to the castle. You can have whatever pieces you want, right? So I think it speaks volumes, one, that you're kind of guiding the development of this product, right, for what your team see internally that you need to accomplish with it. But also at the same time, right, I'm sure there are many customers that are even larger than I am, that are probably like, how do I get to a standardized platform, right? Like, as you were saying, you need, you know, when it was bring whatever you want, right? And you could put it together. There's a challenge of sometimes things get built inefficiently, right? Because you can throw a ton of hardware at them. And now where it's kind of like, at least there's a framework, right, to help you service all of these pieces and then get them into a standardized model as you try to do things like infrastructure as code, right? Try to do things like standardizing on the way the application needs or the way that the platform needs it to be delivered. I think that's super relevant. And I think it's tough sometimes. We always come up with this. We had a question in the chat here, right? But a lot of this is the partnership between Dell and VMware, right? So a lot of VMware tools, but I think PowerFlex uniquely, right, has that option to work with other platforms as well. Can you guys talk to a little more about, you know, maybe some other hypervisors or some other services they can leverage and integrate?
Yep. And specifically, Curtis is asking about what about Hyper-V?
Yep.
So yeah, if we could talk to that, please.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, that's one of the big powers of the product, right? You can think of it as, we think about it as the platform of the future, where if you were to deploy the scale out block everywhere, let's just say, as the product, this is what I want you to do, guys. Deploy scale out block everywhere, and then run whatever you want on top of it on your compute side. So we support Hyper-V, we support vSphere, we support different flavors of Linux on the hypervisor side. We support bare metal connectivity. So if you had, you know, a Linux environment in which you're running a database, we support that, you know, solid. We support all of the three major cloud, you know, container environments. We support Tanzu, we support, and all those running bare metal, which is a unique piece where if you get to the point where you really want to start to divvy up how effective your containers are, we can run them bare metal or within a hypervisor. And so when you add that flexibility with the flexibility of HCI versus 2-layer, with the flexibility of extreme scale, these vectors coming together allow you to think about replatforming and then running it all together, right? We, you know, when we think about, you know, the future, you know, we're very much looking about multi-cloud and what does it mean? Where do we run this? How does that work in the public clouds? How do we work together to align that? What does that mean in terms of consistent experience? So I think, you know, as we work through Dell Tech World and a bunch of other things coming forward, you know, we're really working on expanding that view to help kind of cross this multi-cloud chasm across all of those pieces. I know that sounds like a little bit crazy. Hey, you guys are doing everything for everybody, but the core tenet of the product being software-defined storage gives that to begin with. And then it's our job to make it easy for folks to consume, which is which is difficult, but you know, that's my job.
So Matt,
does that help answer the question?
I think it might. I want to dig into a little bit and just see if I can tease out Curtis's underlying here. If you're going with Hyper-V, do you lose some of the automation and the APIs that you were talking about because of the vCenter tie-in?
Yeah, that's a good point. So our best automation experiences with VMware, for sure. There's a couple things that are different with Hyper-V specifically. So in the Hyper-V scenario, you can only deploy in 2-layer. So on the Hyper-V scenario, you run Hyper-V on the compute side and then use PowerFlex on the back end. You know, we initially had them, we initially allowed kind of supporting of both, But frankly, the scale and performance that was running on that Hyper-V stack, there was some storage issues. So separating them out is a key tenet. That's the first thing. In terms of the end-to-end automation, it's not the same. So there becomes some manual points of view that you align. The deployment in terms of getting things up and going, we can get the hypervisor on installed and configured, but then the management kind of moves to the vendor tools, except for on like firmware updates and those kind of things where we can still completely automate.
Thanks.
So already you're digging me right on the product weakness within 30 minutes. I knew it wouldn't take very long, but that's you guys are spot on.
Hey man, that's the user group here. You know, we're out there to try and solve the world's problems and poking at getting it done. Curtis, he also seemed to open up the idea that he might consider moving towards VMware. So, you know, I think it's largely what your data center looks like right now and where do you want to take it? And then do you need to standardize on things, or can you be open to different things? Oftentimes.
Yeah, I was gonna throw in there. I feel like if I rewind a couple of years ago when I was at New Belgium, we very much, when I came in, right, we had a VMware environment. We had some stuff that was stood up in Hyper-V, and I would have loved some sort of management layer over them that could have aided in that like conversion process or standardizing in certain VMs. Because I mean, I think we cut a couple hundred VMs from Hyper-V over into VMware, which is not the end of the world. It wasn't impossible, but it was downtime. It was refactoring. It was, should we waste time with this or should we just rebuild this service? So, you know, I think that's can add value, right? Whenever you're trying to, again, in this world, right, of like BCDR and SD-WAN and all these other pieces, like it definitely benefits you to standardize on certain services when you can. I know that's not always possible, but anything that can help you do that, right? I feel like from an administrator point of view is save me some time, right? I want less headache putting this together and trying to figure out where that is going forward, right? But I think that's the power of all those automated processes. I think, Matt, you were talking about this a lot earlier, is that like, that can just give you more time, right? To look at other things that, you know, you don't want to be wasting your time trying to figure these things out. So let a lifecycle manager or a tool like that help you with the automation part of it so that you can say, hey, when we hit this, you know, I'm moving from a couple hundred hosts to a couple thousand hosts, or in Jim's case, to a couple thousands hosts. You know, how is that sustainable? How do I maintain all this equipment the way we want to, keeping security top of mind? You need some automation, right? So that's where I think we're all looking towards tools to help with that and save time, right? We're all trying to do more with less. That's definitely the human element of it.
And, you know, you mentioned earlier, Jim, I think you touched on it a little bit. Way back, it was, you know, 3-tier, and you guys were organized in 3-tier, and then you started shifting that. In the few minutes left, you know, can you share that experience? And Adam, you know, jump in here because you went through the same thing, but I think there's a lot of members who are somewhere on their journey, and some are further along than others. Some are trying to get to, how do I really organize my team to take better advantage of this stuff that's out there? So it's a great conversation to bring up.
Yeah, I think, right, there was, it wasn't like something that happened overnight, right? It took years to go through the people transformation of our digital transformation, and different parts of the organization, there were different experiences with it. In the infrastructure space, right, it's not traditionally conducive to, you know, the product model and agile and all of those things, right? So it took some time. When we first brought this in, right, we had a vision of where we wanted to go, and a key part of that was, you know, heavy virtualization, containers, PCF, and software-defined storage. And so we really had two options there, right, from the beginning. And what was really interesting about the beginning of all of this was, right, it was compatible with the way our organization was stood up at that time, right? You know, to bring PowerFlex in. So you can have that 5-year plan to transfer, you know, or more accelerated, depending on what you want to do. But, you know, if it, you know, the couple-year, 5-year plan, right, to get to a certain point, and work with the way that you organize today, and then work on that transformation and understand, okay, because each organization's different and what they're able to do and able to accomplish is going to be different. So what I'd say is it's an open mind and it's really ensuring your people, right, that they're going to come along in this process, and there's a ton of opportunity to learn. There's a ton of opportunity to advance and grow. It's not. It looks sometimes it can be a little daunting, right, when you're sitting on one side versus the other, and vice versa. But I think we've done it, and it's we were you can think about it, right? I mean, we were you go into any large, significantly large organization, right? It's red tape, it's bureaucracy, it's a lot of politics, right? And it's just sticking to it and working, chipping away, and it's where we're at today. And it's continuing to evolve, right? And I think it's just like anything, right? Just like the product's evolving, our organization's evolving, the capabilities and what we can do are evolving. So
I've seen a couple other things also, like just in general, for initial sales of the product, it's common that it's project based potentially, right? Whether you probably all familiar that with HCL with Rail. And then what happens typically internally, it's kind of funny, we call it the Pac-Man, because it gets into the environments, and then people see how well it runs something. They go, I wonder how we'll run this. And then that kind of gets added. Wow. Well, I wonder how it will run this. And then that process of people seeing the proof helps the other transition as well. So working that side from a bottoms up, and then also we constantly work from top down, right? And if there's a macro direction from CIO about transformation, when you hit both of those together, that seems to help a lot of the conversations that I'm in working with all different kinds of customers. I don't know if that makes a difference, but that's what I see, Adam.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what you said there, that we had a very similar experience when we deployed our first VX Rail like 4 or 5 years ago. It was down at our Denver site, and we tried to say, hey, look, if it's not a brewery dependent service, it doesn't live down there, right? If it's site specific, it lives at one of the sites. And then as time went on, all of our analysts and folks that were building applications for us were like, oh, I'd really like to find a reason for it to run down in Denver. And you're like, well, okay, hold on. Like, so that was kind of our step that was like, okay, now that's a great step and I'm glad we took it, but now we're letting them down, right? The stuff that's the most crucial to our business, the on-site factory production part of it, should get the best experience, right? So now we need to bring that up to the same level, right? And I think for a lot of folks, that is, that's where you want to get, right? You want to get to the point where you're delivering the services that people expect and it's exceeding their expectations, right? So if you're staying in front of that, then you're not, on the critical path of this is why business is impacted, or this is why we can't fail that over, or if we had an incident, what are we doing here? And for my team specifically, I think as we standardize on those platforms, right, it did things like just keeping security top of mind of like, we're going to patch things better. We're on a proven design. It's not piecemeal. There's not this weird NIC firmware that has some exploit that we didn't update over here. You know what I mean? There's just those little things that, we could spend all day looking at that and coming up and going through lists that, it's not sustainable. You need to adopt a strategy that is sustainable for where your business is going and try to help pull them along, right? That's part of digital transformation and being business drivers. It's viewing IT as empowering the business instead of being a cost center, right?
It's the force multiplier. That's
for sure.
That's
Right.
how I like it.
Yeah, I think of all of the things we've avoided in the past 5 years because we have this platform, right? All of the behaviors and things that we used to do, and just the sprawl. I think about it like, well, Splunk runs on this, right? Those guys wanted to have just their own dedicated, and they wanted to spread it all over the place, right? It runs fine on this, right? Or, we're chomping, like you said, Pac-Man, right? It is very much Pac-Man. We're constantly going after, okay, what's the next thing, right? Green Plum database being that next thing, right? So, and we just worked with Matt's team on that. So, I think, it's definitely, and it's great. I mean, like I said, I think about what we've avoided and just, I'm looking forward to the future constantly every day just to see what's next.
It's really exciting, folks. We're at quarter till here. I am going to open it up for one last question from the chat to see if we've got anything out there. So please put it in. I think I'm double checking. Looks like we answered all the Q&A. That's fair. I've got my backup team of Udit and Vikram. Are we good to go? Let's see. Looks like nothing's coming through the chat. This has been a really fun conversation. Thanks, Matt, for coming on and really giving, bringing PowerFlex back to the members, and Jim for giving them real context as to what's going on. Adam, thanks for co-hosting. It's always a blast. And I really love to get more into the people side of IT conversation. You know, we always touch on that towards the end, but it really continues for me to emphasize the technology's pretty much the easy part. It's getting the technology into a position where you've got the right org structure to support that and really take advantage. So we'll see about bringing those conversations back. Before I wrap, folks, it is February, and I think Dell Technologies World still has registration open for alumni and early registration. There might be some neat awards if you're an alumni reg or some gifts I think I saw on the website. So if you haven't taken advantage of that, you still have till the end of February. Keep that in mind. Thanks again for our sponsors, Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel for making this happen. Mark your calendars for Dell Tech World in person and come see Jim Hall. I think Jim's going to be there highlighting in some sessions. And if he's not in the session if there's a conflict, we're going to do our best to bring Jim Hall to the Converge user group meeting live in person, 3 to 5 p.m. on Tuesday. Time subject to change, but I sure hope it doesn't. And Adam's going to be there as well. Matt Paul will be there as well because we'll kidnap him and bring him in case we have to.
Yes,
Jenny?
I'll be there for sure.
That's fantastic. And we're going to have other experts and the whole board will be there. It's our big event. Mark your calendars. Please let us know if you're going to be there, and we will try to do some shout outs. Adam, thank you again for co-hosting. Jim, Matt, thanks for being here. Jenny, are you out there?
I am. I'm out here.
All right. Thanks
Thanks
everybody for attending. I'm handing it over to Jenny.
Yeah, just as David said, thank you so much for attending today. Again, like to thank our sponsors, Dell Technologies and VMware. As mentioned earlier, I said that I would include the chat link in the box, the survey link in the chat box. That is down there, as well as our link to the website that has all of our future events. If you do complete the survey, you will be entered into a drawing for a prize. We will get that out as soon as possible. And as mentioned, we have some awesome events coming up, not only Dell Technology World, but also we have our first virtual reality community hour on March 17th. It's at 12 p.m. Eastern time, and we have our April community hour on April 14th. So we would love to see you there. More details to come. Be on the lookout for social media posts as well as in your email with more details on those two events. If you've enjoyed this program today and enjoyed being a Converged member, please share future events with colleagues and friends. We would absolutely love them to attend. And with all of that being said, thank you again for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks all.
Have a great day.
Have a great day.